Hey, hi everybody. Welcome back to another stream. Today we have with us, as always, Vedant. Vedant,
Hi.
say hi.
Yeah, I already did.
ठीक है. Today we have a very special guest coming talking to us. Today we have Amanjeet with us. Hey Amanjeet, welcome to the stream.
Hey guys, hey, how are you?
Good, good, all
Good.
good.
How are you doing?
I'm good, I'm good.
So today's topic, right? Like I think was something that we had been seeing in the past for a while. We have seen it on Twitter. We have seen a few people play around with it, give feedback and things like those. And we thought, why not come talk to you about it? Like, who better than the person who is working on it to give us more details? Uh, for everybody who has not seen or know about what this is, we are today trying to talk about a UI automation framework, which a company called as mobile.dev, where Amanjit currently works, recently released so that you can basically run UI tests. The end goal is making UI tests for Android much easier to write and much easier to maintain. We'll go in details about that. That's why we have Amanjit with us here. But yeah, that's just a quick intro.
Yeah, this is a topic UI automation is everyone wants, loves to talk about, but no one actually wants to write
Do it.
automation. Yeah. And that's probably because of the pain of writing UI automation and flakiness of it, right? So probably Maestro will eliminate that pain. So, Amanjit, yeah, over to you.
Yeah, so I think this problem of writing test is generally not about UI test, it's even about unit test.
Correct.
But even the companies who have like basically understood that okay, unit testing is also important, and they have unit testing in pipeline, and developers do write there. It's very difficult to find an organization who do UI test as equivalent as they do unit test. And the reason is that testing should basically catch all the issues. That is one thing, but it should help you to develop faster. Like I should be able to write features and should be able to write test as fast as like basically it should not stop me. And the very same thing comes for UI test also. When you write unit test, it should feel like very same, like it should not be slowing you down. And it comes to every other testing framework. So Maestro was developed keeping all those things in mind that whatever UI testing framework we work on, it should not stop developers to write test. It should like boost their productivity, And there are definitely other problems which we will discuss. But productivity wise, it should boost every engineer, whether working on iOS or any other cross platform or Android. It should boost the productivity, and that's how it was basically designed and developed, uh, keeping in mind all the problems that present frameworks have.
Got
Right.
it.
Right. And I think even before we get to those things, right, like talking about why the unit test, as you said, right, like there are reasons why we prefer not to write unit UI tests today, as you said. Uh, Mobile.dev, right? Let's talk a little bit about the company that you work for, right? Is a startup which like the way they position themselves is like a left shift left for the mobile app development, right? Uh, could you talk to us about what shift left means overall? What does that have to do with mobile apps in general, right?
Yeah. So if I discuss about like generally like shift left mentality, what is so it's basically catching all the issues pre-production before you release all the issues. So it's like technically nobody wants to release issues. It's basically just to catch all the issues pre-production, so that yeah, you should not sacrifice your users just because your app didn't launch faster, or just because there was a feature which was expected to work and it didn't work because there was a button which went missing due to a state or something like that. So if I have to uh, like classify it very concretely, it is a platform which basically uh, targets to catch all the functional and non-functional failures. Right now, it is like any functional failure, like for example, if your state went missing, like and it affects UI, right? And things like app startup issues and APK size, memory leaks, all of that type of things.
Right.
At the time when the PRs are reached. So this is actually very important because right now the problem is that if you take example of any setup, it basically works on production. You catch your non-functional failures. You know that app startup is being a problem from production. You know APK size is a problem from production. So the target is to actually know it when as soon as developers are developing their features at the time of PRs.
Correct. Right. And uh, overall, the mentality, as you said, right, shift left mentality is like more of a mindset thing that needs to happen at an org level, right? That hey, uh, one of the examples that you gave was that, right? Like hey, basically trying to find issues that you have across before the this production, right? But then it shifting left could mean multiple things for multiple organizations. I have seen variations of this at various wherein like shifting left could also mean you as a dev find issues before you give it off to the QA, right? That is too late in the cycle to be finding at least bugs which you think you should have fixed to begin with, right? And that is the mindset of it. And while I would love to talk more about all of those things, coming back to the main focus for today's topic, right? Uh, you, as you mentioned, right? Let's talk a little about UI testing in general, right? So currently, the only way that Android lets you do UI testing is you could write an Espresso test. You could use the test recorder that Android Studio have to record tests, right? And these are predominantly the two major approaches that today exist in this space. That hey, you can use this to write a unit UI test for this, right? One of the challenges I think with that is a lot of two. The problem is two part, right? One is these tests are hard to write and record and do all of those things, time consuming. The second part of it is to run them you need an actual device, and that is the second part of the problem, which a lot of people skip out because hey, you know what, that takes a lot of time for us to actually record a test or write a test, right? uh, Now, what we want to talk to you about, right? I don't think there is a solution to UI testing on the other side of the spectrum, wherein you don't need a device or an emulator. That still needs to happen because if you want it to actually go through all the flows, that is fine, right? But then you can optimize it for this side, which is what Maestro is trying to do, right? The other side of the story that, hey, can you make it writing UI tests much simpler and much easier, right? Uh, Even before we look at how you did it, what you did, if you had to talk about uh, how did you approach something like this, right? Like why did you think of so you, as you mentioned that hey, you know what, like you wanted it to have those benefits of having it flexible and easy and maintainable as a unit test, right? How do you go about thinking about it to begin with? Like why did that idea come from? Where did that come in from? How did you think that hey, this can work, and what is the basic idea behind it at least?
Correct, correct. So this basically goes back, I think, this year starting when we started basically testing for all the non-functional failures like performance regressions and all of app startup regressions. And to run any basic flow or core flow of the app, let's take an example. Let's say Zomato, right? And if we want to book like order a food, so like let's say their flow name is food order flow, right? And I want to write a test for it. Now the problem is that one way could be that okay, I can say that okay, Zomato developers would write the UI test, Espresso test, and could basically dump all the performance metrics which I need at the end of the test. That is one thing. But the problem for us was that we can't create this dependency because espresso tests at the first place are very flaky.
Right.
It doesn't work every time. Like you can't assume that there will be everything on the screen right away because yeah, real network. And if you are even mocking things, you sometimes need to revise all the network mock responses because just because you have revised your API contracts and you forgot to update the responses, right? So there are many things which needs which basically creates a strong coupling of over to this espresso test. And for us, because we started by just depending on those espresso tests, it became impossible to even root cause any issues which can basically trigger any time when we are dumping those performance issues. So the whole idea was that we have to like create something which basically is in our hands and we orchestrate the whole app ourselves and then dump all the performance metrics. Because initially the problem was that we were depending on the espresso test or XC test and that worked, but sometimes it became impossible to even root cause like what's the what's even wrong on their side. And every time it ended up to be like, okay, the espresso didn't work because of the flakiness, the mocks were not updated, network mocking responses, and so many things. And that's why like the whole thought around Maestro kicked in, and we thought, okay, there's definitely a need to take this thing in our hand because if there is a problem, I will not say that the problems are not there, but at least we can root cause it now. We can see that what went wrong because we know that where it stopped. We know that what state the emulator was in. So that's basically the origination of Maestro. At that time, it was named Conductor.
Got it. Got it. Fair enough, right? And as I said, taking over that and being able to run it faster makes more sense. Uh, how would you? So there are today a couple of tools in the market, right, which basically paid, free, whatever, right? At this point of time, I think the most common ones which a lot of organizations tend to use is something like APM, right? Which is pretty close to what we are trying to talk about today, right? How do you compare that to something like that? Like, how do you, in your view, how does Maestro stand up against APM? Like, and I agree, this is not like a feature to feature comparison. That is not what you're trying to get into, but that is the closest in terms of a actual competitor that, if I have to say, right, like not competitor, but then as an alternative. That is how I thought of it, and I think that was one of the first questions that I had in my mind. Right? Like, how is it different from something like APM today?
Got it. Yeah, it's a very good question. So the thing is that first of all, Maestro. So APM, if you see like APM as a tool, right? It's mostly used by QAs in each and every organization.
Right.
But right now, I don't see Maestro as a QA tool. I see it as both QA and developer tool. Like it, it is not completely black box. It is not completely white box also. It basically somewhere sits in between because I have seen people using it for like QA organization using it and developer community also using it. And if you see things like orchestrating the app like Blackbox, that definitely aligns with APM. But things like mocking network responses, having conditional things, and all of these type of things, they basically are characteristics of a white box tool like Espresso. So it somewhat sits in between. But if I have to state the differences, one of the things which I have seen QAs acknowledging is the fact that the setup that is needed by Maestro, it is very less. There is no like education curve which is needed, high education curve. They have even I have even seen QAs which have just onboarded like a fresher QA and they have started writing Maestro test just very quickly and are able to automate whole end-to-end flow in no time. And with APM, the problem is you have to set up SDK and a lot of many things, which basically creates setup time and that education curve a lot. So I would say setup is problem, and then things like flakiness, which is basically common to both Espresso and Appium. That is something which by default Maestro is trying to do like under the hood implicitly, because it's very obvious that you will not find everything readily available on the UI, right? And uh, like one of the example is that if you see QAs, they test on real network.
Right.
Every time you see a QA, they will test on real network. But on the other hand, if you see a developer, they will mock network in Espresso and they will not test on real network. So if we are targeting both the worlds, we basically try to cater all these things. For developers, it makes sense to mock network and do the test, and things would be readily available if network response is valid. But for QAs, I think, yeah, since they are working on real network, so there should be some things like, for example, conditional things. Like there have been times where a QA would expect a screen to be there, but there is a bug which is basically stopping them to work ahead and execute all of their automation tests. So they just want to surpass all the things and have a conditional type of things. So doing small hacks in APM is also very hard sometimes. That's why I think that painless thing and all the tolerance of the flakiness, it's basically winning the QA audience.
Got it. So, do you have any example where you can show us how to basically write these tests with Maestro?
Yeah, I can share my screen. My screen visible?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have this Firefox app, and what I will do is I will create a
Could you possibly zoom in on the emulator?
on the emulator.
No, on the terminal, I think. The
Oh,
fonts
okay.
are too small.
My bad. I meant the terminal.
Maybe Command Plus, yeah.
Okay, I just. Is it visible?
Yes, it is. So, what do you need to start testing?
Yeah.
Only the APK?
Yeah, I'll just show you through documentation. So yeah, definitely you need APK. It's basically like a subject which you need to test.
Right.
And I will just walk you through like the setup so that you know that what like why the setup is easy and all of those things, right?
Right.
So it's just a like brew binary which you need to install. So I will explain it for Android right now. So it's basically brew install Maestro, and then like it's all that you need. For iOS, we are right now dependent on this binary which is called IDB by Facebook. It's like one of the extra things which we are dependent on right now for iOS, but for Android, it's just this brew install Maestro, and this would basically work.
Understood.
And yeah, if you look at this, it's basically writing UI test in a declarative format in a YAML file, because it's simple to read, everything is going in declarative world, right? Like if you
Right.
see Jetpack Compose, if you see Swift UI. So another thought for this was that it should be very simple to understand, and it should not take a lot of time, lot of jargon to understand, like uh, what's like a primitive test. Like for example, if you write a espresso test, there are things like view matchers, there are things like intent matchers. There is a lot of jargon that you need to understand at the first place. But
Right.
for writing this type of test, like it's basically like simple natural language, which mostly people find it easy to onboard. Okay, so what I will do is I'll first write a simple, just like launching a app, and then we would progressively build on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So app ID.
I think your font is too small in this tab.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So first step is that I am trying to get app ID for this Firefox. Um, so it is, yeah. So copying this app ID. Yeah. So it's basically just saying that I want this app to be open, like just launching the app.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if this works.
Basically do this with any package name, right?
Yeah.
It's
I
for
can
device.
correct. I can change it, change the app ID to Gmail, and it will work. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's basically a basic launch app.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you want to launch, like I can show another example. Uh, if you want to launch, let's say, YouTube,
You just
just
need to change the package name.
yeah, just mention the
Understood.
package
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it would. I'm not going to change the file name just for convenience.
Yeah.
But yeah, this would work. Yeah. So okay. So what? Let's see what we can test in this Firefox app. Uh, okay, I'll freshly clear the storage and see if we can assert any onboarding flow. Okay. So if we launch the app in a fresh state,
Right.
and if we scroll down, we see the start browsing, right?
Right.
Let's try to assert if this start browsing button is there.
Yeah.
The UX of the Firefox browser looks disastrous. Like on the first screen, the CTA is like hidden below two scrolls.
I think that's
Yeah.
because of some security things like GDPR and all. You'll have to accept and then only go ahead.
Okay. Now the thing with this, I think, is that we need to launch in fresh state, which means we have to clear state. So if I just quickly show you this, launch app. Yeah. So launch app, basically you can mention the app ID, which it's not needed right now because you have mentioned it. But when you like, it's an optional argument. But things like this, they are needed to clear the state. This is an iOS specific argument, which is needed to clear the keychain if you are working on iOS UI test. This would be needed because that start browsing basically is there when you start the session freshly.
First time, yeah.
So
it will clear the local storage?
It will clear the local storage, correct. Okay, so we will launch the app, clear the state, we will scroll. So I think we needed to scroll 2 times or 3 times because okay, I have to see this again. One, so 2 times. Okay, so basically the thing is that according to this dimensions, like scrolling once might not work. That's why I'm going to repeat the scroll part. So there is a command to actually repeat the any command. Repeat. Yeah. So what we will do is repeat times 3 and commands scroll and see if this works.
You have the wrong package name. You still point to.
Oh, is it? Oh, oops. What was the package name? Or Mozilla Firefox?
Yeah.
I think so.
Or Mozilla Firefox. Okay, something else is wrong.
Like the story of always something is wrong.
Oh. Hmm. Yeah. So this is one of the things which I have seen, indentation, which is basically a problem of YAML.
Yeah.
But the thing is that like there have been even discussions that we can like change the way how we see this format, right? Like YAML has been very convenient, but we can change it to like let's say Kotlin DSL also.
That's nice.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, like okay, now we can assert that this start browsing is here. So assert visible start browsing, and let's tap on this button then. Yeah.
Nice.
For a developer, I can understand. So you can mock the network response and exactly know how many times you have to scroll to get to this button, right? But what about the QA folks? If they test it with a real network connection, for someone it might be two scroll, for someone it might be three or four scroll. How do they figure out that?
Correct. So since that thing is dependent on the dimension of the device, right?
Right.
Right.
What we are trying to do is that right now the thing is that this if you see this command, right, like the scroll command, uh, it basically doesn't take any like pixelated dimension that we have to scroll from here to here, uh, like this one. Swipe does take it, but scroll doesn't. And we
Right.
have seen this problem that when we are testing on multiple devices, there could be a possibility that just one scroll works on one device and testing on other device doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I have to do it like 3 times as you said, or 2 times as you said.
Right.
So we are trying to take in account the dimensions of the device that you are testing on. That is something like I would say it's like an open issue right now, because we have also seen QAs and even like developers. I think it's basically a common problem that you will test on multiple devices and you don't expect it to work on every device. So we are trying to create like a common solution for this, that if you have to even swipe, then the swipe should work on each and every device. Like for
Right.
example, if like one common use case is that when onboarding is done, you show the view pager, right, that your app can do this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, uh, this is like nobody likes to do this because it basically deals with like all this start and end, which
Right.
can work, but people would say that okay, it's very convenient, so I just want to do like swipe, swipe, and swipe, like just
Right.
right swipe and it should work. I should not like should not mention these pixels or should
Mm-hmm.
not mention all the dimensions, right? So yeah, the same thing with scroll also. So I think one of the things is that we might try to do is that maybe take in account what the device dimensions are and then try to create a global solution around it. But yeah, it's an open thing. You're right. That's why I have to do it 3 times right now. But
Right. Right.
ideally, it should be one. And another solution for this it could be that since I need start browsing, I could just like without mentioning like how many times, I could just say scroll to element start browsing.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah. So if it will find, then it will scroll to that. Otherwise, it will just fail saying that I didn't find any start browsing in the view hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. So basically, by text or by ID, if you could find an element in the view hierarchy, then you could do things like scroll to that or like tap on that directly. Like you don't really need to scroll unless you want to test the scroll behavior, right? If all you care about testing is just the button behavior, that hey, the button should be visible and it should be tappable, then I don't really care how much you scroll, right? Because I don't think you are going to write a test which says there should the button should be visible after two scrolls or one scroll, right? Because that is
Correct.
right. Even at the end user's device, it is going always going to be different for different phone sizes, screen densities, and things like those, right? So that is the so all you care about is hey, does this button exist in the view hierarchy? Can I tap on it? That is the end behavior that we are trying to test, right?
Correct. Yeah, this has been one of the things which I have seen coming from multiple developers working with Maestro. Scroll to element has been like one of the hot things which people want, and it also makes sense, right? Like you don't care like how much you scroll. It should be there. It is there or it is not there, and you just care about that.
Correct. Right. And that's the behavior, right? Like when I'm testing, I don't really think like the view size should be this much, the view height should be this much, the padding should be this much. All I think about is, hey, like, there should be this view that exists at least. That is all I care about. The other things is, I'm assuming you would have other ways to augment it and like build it while you're building it, right? Uh,
Correct.
Uh,
and
yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Okay. I think I definitely like the fact that uh, disclaimer, like I had tried it even before today's stream, like in the past couple of weeks, I have given it a try with a few flows that I've been working on. And I think I like, as you said, right, what I like about it compared to Appium is definitely the fact that it is less overhead of setting up things. Like APM setup and installation for the first time is like a disaster to be working with. And then later on, also, it requires a lot of specific syntaxes and this that you need to know about this and write Java code to handle it in a way, or like, things like those, right? It becomes very hard if you don't, if you have never done APM, then it is very hard to get started with unless you spend some significant time. I like the fact, like even on this just now, as we, yeah, as you showed a demo, right? Like installing a CLI tool and then basically writing 3 lines of commands and being able to run this is like very useful. At least saves a lot of time for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say maybe try to look it as different type of like different level of organizations. Like let's say you start small scale. Nobody writes UI test in small scale
Right.
companies.
Right.
Mid scale, they highly depend on QAs. Highly depend on QAs. No developers write UI test.
Right.
As soon as a company scales up, they will write UI test because things like performance, things like app startup, that is needed. And like the funny thing is that when you see a large scale company, the thing is not UI testing because that is still done by QAs. The thing is non-functional failures. Like for example, I need a check on my core flow, booking flow, and I need to see when that flow regresses or app startup flow. That also needs UI test, but that can't be done simply in APM. That's why
Yeah.
company will also invest in APM and company will also invest in UI test via Espresso because Espresso is definitely close to uh, like close to solve like non-functional failures. Like we can dump all the performance checks at the end, but that can't happen in APM. So they will invest in both of the things. So yeah,
Right. And I think one of the things that I've seen in the past also is uh, when the tests break, right, it becomes very hard to figure out where and make changes accordingly. Given that the QA, as you said, rightly said, right, most of the APM, I don't think I've seen a team which, in an ideal world, you would want the devs and the QA to have collective ownership on APM so that that becomes collaborative. But I don't think I've ever seen an org so far in my career where I can see both of them at least devs don't contribute. Like it is like a still a very far distant dream that devs are going to contribute to the APM repository that they have. Uh, Makes it much much harder to do anything in general now. Like you can't basically do I would rather test it manually myself. I'll scroll it physically and test it, but I would rather not write that code of APM as a dev for sure. Like I think that's the mindset. What I liked about the tool Maestro specifically was that I do not mind writing this because it is like 2 3 lines of change that I have to do. Plus uh, in the longer process, if a test breaks, if I change a feature, if I now no longer have a start browsing button, I just got rid of the button for whatever product requirement, right? uh, it basically means that 1 line of change that I need to do in the entire test suite, right? That's where I think there is a lot of power that Maestro brings. Something like Espresso Test Recorder, right? Like a lot of people, when I was trying to talk about it to quite a few people, they're like, hey, you know what? Android Studio has a test recorder now, which you could basically do the same thing and you don't even have to write anything. It will do it for you. But I think what it fails to take into consideration is every time you change something, you have to redo the entire test again for it to succeed, right? It depends how you structure the test, of course. But then, let's say in a page there was a navigation element, clicking on which would take you to the next screen. Now you moved it altogether, and that button does not exist. Now that entire test after that point is broken until you fix it, right? And now there is no way for me to go in time in that recorder and just change that unless I want to edit the code that it has generated for me, right? And that again comes back to the same. catch-22 situation, right? I didn't want to write code, that is why I used the test recorder, and now I have to fix the test recorder. I'm going back to making changes in the code. So I was like, that's where I saw a lot of power for sure. Like I can just say that, hey, no longer assert that this button exists on the screen, and my test will start working as expected, right?
Yeah, correct. I think like as you rightly said that it is not common for an organization where developers and QAs are collaboratively working on automation, right? I would say it is a problem because if you see that if they start work together, then things like, for example, let's say if I want that uh, my tests are more like having high coverage, because there is like two audience, right? Like developers know what cases are,
Yeah,
and QAs would definitely, as a third person, would be able to test it, but they might not know how to increase the coverage. They might like cover certain end-to-end flow, but as the time progresses, there is a need to increase the coverage for a particular flow as well. It's just not like a happy path which they just execute and assert things. There is a failure path. What if your token doesn't sync? How the UI looks like then? So things like that needs a knowledge transfer between QAs and developers, and that's where I think it is important to collaborate. Although it is not happening, and one of the simple reason is that right now, since things with Espresso and setting up all those things are very difficult, and as soon as the app scales up, developers find it very hard. That's why organization invest in QAs,
yeah.
and we have that thing with Appium because that's one of the major tools that right now QAs use. But since Maestro has kicked in, we have seen that since the setup is very easy, it is basically used by both QAs and like developers, and it's kind of a bridging this gap between the QA and developer audience, which I think should be filled.
Right. And I think I like the fact that it is easy for both the sides of the spectrum to understand and write and manage. Like, as you said, right, like that collaboration over a few YAML files is much easier versus like a full repository
Correct.
of Java code, which Appium tests and like trying to figure out what is going on. Because how you write code is a very personal thing, right? Like you might have a different mindset and a way that you have thought about it and structured it. Today, if I go look at the test and try to fix something just so that I can fix the test that is broken, I might end up causing a lot of other tests to break for which I have no idea about it. As a QA team, you might have written a lot of other use cases that you would want to cover with that. And I think with at least the YAML files, it is very explicit and very clear that this is what is going to happen. This is the tab that is happening. Like it is not linked to other parts. You can't like one of the things that I've hated about Appium is that if you it is very easy for you to overcomplicate things. Like you would create a lot of nested classes, interfaces, and like implement those and then import those somehow and give it that behavior, mock behavior, and things like those, right? And changing anything in that flow basically means everywhere that is being used starts to break down altogether, right? And I think that's where I thought that was a challenge. Uh, One thing that I wanted to ask you about, right? How do you see yourself? Let's assume that a organization wants to use Maestro as one of the this, right? Uh, my thought process around that was like I don't think they should replace Appium with Maestro. It is not like a one-to-one mapping or a alternative. The way I thought of it was that hey, maybe you know what, this is an additional dev checklist kind of a thing that before you give a build to the QA or hand it off to them, you basically run this test suite that you have written as a dev so that you are 100% sure that hey, everything works uh, at least from a UI wise, from a flow perspective, and things like those, right? Because we as devs are very lazy, right? Like, face like it or not, we keep saying that hey, you go to X1 some payment page or some coupons, whatever that page is, go there, change something. you only basically just say that, hey, I've just changed one thing. I don't want to go through all the screens and test everything works or not, right? And that laziness is where generally leads to a lot of bugs that, hey, it's fine. Like, I don't care. Like, the QA will take care of it. The QA will do the manual testing or automated testing, whatever, right? And I think that's where I saw a lot of benefit that, hey, if it is as simple as this, it could just be one additional thing that I run before I give the bill to QA. So if it fails, I know that, hey, there is something, right? The advantages is definitely the back and forth that you can reduce, right? That, hey, let's say due to your change, something broke and you are not able to proceed after a certain screen in the flow. I think this is like a very small minor bug which could should have never made it to QA to begin with. But sadly, today in the world we live, that happens quite often than we would like to admit. And I think it's not about whose mistake. I think it is more about the fact that, hey, you it adds to the release cycle time, right? Like your 2 weeks, let's say you have a 2 or 3 week sprint cycle. The back and forth between QA inevitably adds to the release time, right? That, hey, your daily release could get delayed by a certain value because you now the QA has everything that the QA had done so far is almost invalid because you're going to give a new build with that fix, right? So it adds to that manual stress and time in this, right? How do you see, does that model that I have in my mind align with what you are thinking, how you people are thinking of it? Are there, do you think of it as a replacement to Appium altogether? How do you feel about that?
Uh, so I would say that since it is like Maestro at core is made uh, by seeing a lot of experience with what is wrong with APM, what is wrong with Selenium, what is wrong with Espresso, what is wrong with XC test, and like a lot of other tools which are there. I would say that definitely using it alone would give a lot of advantages over these all of the mentioned frameworks or libraries. Uh, but the way how you use it, like for example, right now the thing is that the community is shaped in a way that since there was nothing which basically made this collaboration easier for QAs and developers, right? It is basically very easy to miss any bug and release it in production. Like what you said, right? That there is a like very easy like chance that okay, developers will not write UI test and QAs will write like a execution flow, and they might miss that okay, what happened in the failure state
Yeah.
simply because they didn't think about the states and that collaboration didn't happen. So I think that's where like things like Maestro would be very useful because it's very easy to collaborate. It's nothing like learning a lot of jargon, and you could easily collaborate on what is happening. You can create a repository, let's say, and you can create a workspace, and developers can easily write all this UI test when they are developing features. It is not now as pain as it was, right?
Yeah.
If you are developing like let's say a feature called as add to cart flow, right? Then you could now easily write as soon as you are raising the PR because now it's easy. You don't need to set up your espresso things, and it is very much decoupled from what you are writing in your studio project. So it's basically very easy to navigate and do all of those kind of things. And since you will write it, QAs will also know it that how you are basically trying to cover the states of your feature,
Right.
and the collaboration would definitely become easier. So I would say definitely it has many advantages over the present frameworks, and not only this functional thing. So if you look at all the non-functional failures, which are more common in the large-scale organizations, so UI test is like a prerequisite for it. And if you can't run UI test, then you can't have those non-functional metrics. Like for example, I need frame metrics. I have to execute the UI test, and people don't do it in APM because that collaboration is not there,
Right.
and they have to set up like Espresso. Then even when they have already invested in the APM as a UI testing framework. But now when they set up Espresso, that is very hard because organization has scaled in so much levels that the dependency breaking and all of that will take time, and instrumentation holistically will become 1 KR. So I think that also becomes simpler with Maestro. You can just like execute the test, dump the frame metrics, get what you want, and yeah, things will definitely bridge very easily.
Right. Right. Um, Switching a little bit, right? I know a lot of viewers would be interested to know how does this integrate with CI/CD, right? Because that's where the max benefit of it is, right? Automation coming into picture that I do not want to manually run it every time, but then make it part of the build process or a build step, right? What support do you have for that? How does that look like today?
Right. So right now in the latest version, there is a command which basically like the setup. What it looks like is that you have uh, like a folder or a workspace which basically consists of all the flows that you want to execute. And as soon as if you configure a job that basically run all the tests inside that workspace, you just execute that command and that will uh, block the job until it basically executes till a terminal state, like either it is a fail or it's a success.
Right.
So it's just like Maestro cloud and then the workspace name, and then you can basically test. Uh, you can have all the failure and success state.
Understood.
Got it.
So it's like a command which can be included. A setup is needed. What we saw in the documentation, brew, install, and all of those things, and you can run execute this on CI/CD as well.
Got it. And that is irrespective of what CI/CD you're running, right? Could be Jenkins, could be Travis, could be GitHub Actions for a lot of people, right? Uh,
Correct.
as long as I have access to run a command to the cells, this I should be able to run this on cloud, right?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's pretty much what I would expect. Also, to be honest, like that is nothing more than that is what I need from the tool, right?
Yeah, yeah, that is true. It should be simple, not difficult to automate things.
Right.
uh,
So
I think.
in
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, so in the example you have shown, right, there are lots of commands like tap on and launch app, right? I'm assuming those are predefined command from Maestro, right? Is there any possibility to write custom actions on top of that? For example, there may be a UI element where I need to do a different kind of swipe. Is it possible to write and integrate with Maestro?
Um, you mean like if you want like a custom action that you want to define?
Correct, correct.
Uh, right now, you can like definitely you can extend what we have. Like we have different commands. So how it is arranged implicitly is there are different commands
Mhm.
like swipe command, tap on command, and every command has its configuration. Like for example, tap on would need element selector. Either you can select with text, either you can select with ID, you
Mhm.
can select with relative positioning, so things like that. Swipe can happen like from stating the start point and end point. So you can like easily extend on what we have right now, and like it would definitely need to like build that JVM archive again. But yeah, it is very much possible.
Got it. One more question I have was how does Maestro handle the asynchronous thing? For example, let's say there is a screen and there's a button. When I tap on the button, it does a network call and then shows a list of something, right? So if I have to test this, so how does Maestro know how much time to wait before doing the assertion?
Correct. Yeah. So the whole thing was that it's like as I also said that it's not always that your things would be visible, right?
Right.
So what we do is we basically listen to changes in view hierarchy. And that's how we know that, okay, something has changed. Now we should compare it, and now we should see that what you expect is there or not.
Okay.
Until and unless it will not change, we basically will kind of poll the view hierarchy again and again to see if it is available or not. And this tolerance basically comes from a default timeout, which is set that, okay, like in this time it should be there, which can be customized also. But
Okay.
that's why it is very convenient to write like this in like a very synchronous declarative format, that launch app, tap on this and assert that this is available. So there is a like implicit timeout and this tolerance to check again and again in view hierarchy, which is removing the need of like setting like all the thread sleep and all that pepper
Correct.
sleeps that you need to do in your UI tests.
Yes. So one more question I had was, for example, if I want to test a particular screen, is it possible to launch the app with that particular screen directly? Is there any launch options given as of now?
Uh, it is possible for deep links. Right now, there's a command to do it with deep links. Like if you want that your deep link activity, which is like let's say a cart screen. So it is possible by open link command, and you just mention the URI. But there is one like one of the things which is definitely in discussions. So there is a Slack channel which everybody should join, like Maestro Slack channel. I will provide the links. I think that is one of the place where people discuss what should be made, what should be developed, what will have the highest value. So one of the things which I have seen discussed a lot is launch app with arguments, because that has helped that helps people to like navigate on a particular screen with some extras, which
Right.
will basically launch to a different screen. So that is definitely one of the things which is needed, and it's in backlog which we will try to develop soon.
Got it.
And it is going to be part of this like launch app command, like which I've shown.
Right.
So launch app will mostly have like extras like keys, like which you can mention, and then your app would just launch with those. Like it's very similar to intent extras.
Right.
You just mention all the arguments, and it would launch with that. And it is actually like very similar to what Android has, like intent extras. You launch with that. iOS also have that, but the requirement is different.
Correct.
Like the need for the key value pairs in Android is different from what iOS has.
Right.
But it is applicable for both. Like you can use it for both. So I think that feature will be definitely useful for both the worlds.
Yeah, makes sense. Adnan, you were asking something.
Right. I know this is wishful thinking, but then one of the things that I was wondering was, how do you handle dynamic inputs, right? Like, let's say as part of your flow, you want to verify like a login flow or like a OTP verification flow, right? I'm assuming that there is currently no way to do any of those at this point, right? Because let's assume that an SMS comes through, how do you read it and all of those things? Any pointers around that, how we should model it, how we can work around it?
Correct. That's one of the things which people have requested. Like for example, this SMS thing, magic link thing, which needs network mocking, like which need network mocking, because you simply because if you are testing on emulators, then you need to send that API call, mock it somehow, or maybe read the responses. So yeah, that is something which is like I would say that it would be definitely available very soon, because many apps depend on that. Uh, but right now, how people are doing it is that they have throwaway accounts which have hard-coded OTPs. So mostly people are using that. But that's why I said like network mocking is also one of the things which is planned. So yeah, definitely it would be available. And it is not only needed for login flow, it is very much needed for like other requests also. If you want,
All
let
right.
like let's say if your backend is down for one day,
Mm-hmm.
then you can't stop UI testing. So that type of things.
True, and I think it also mocking at a different set of things, right? Uh, Maybe you don't want to verify the actual network data, right? But then all you care about is, hey, if there is data, can I show a list of that data on the screen, right? That is all you care about when you are testing the UI, right? You don't really care what the network gave to you, because I'm assuming you would either test that via somehow via unit test, or you would either have like a network layer test which is like mocking that repository, trying to actually make that and verify that, right? I like the fact that there is plans to support that. I think the biggest definitely for me was that, hey, it would be nice if we could somehow do dynamic inputs on the fly, right? Because you could do parameters and construction parameterized and constants that you could pass today as part of the initialization, but then those are hard coded, right? Especially if I don't know what the OTP is going to be, it is very hard for me to tell you before and what the OTP is going to be, right?
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So, yeah, definitely network mocking is one of the hot things which is requested in the channel also.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons is this OTP and like all of these things. So, yeah, I would say, yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, definitely. Very, uh, I know we have been speaking quite a bit, and I know we have been talking about, hey, there are a lot of things that are going to come and things like those, right? Uh, just so that everybody is on the same page, I think Wild.dev released Maestro not long ago, right? It's not been like, hey, it's been a year that, hey, we have had this and it is there. It's something very early stages. The potential that has is immense. With time, I like the fact that you're working so much with the community to prioritize things and get things done. That feedback, right? I think that is more important for entire this product, to be honest, because you could build a lot of features, right? And as you said, rightly said, right, maybe what is the most important pain point is more important, this, right? Like with things like dynamic inputs and these network mocking and things like those, right? Maybe I don't care about scrolling thrice or all of those things as much as I care about these things. So definitely there, I think people who have not checked out mobile.dev, I think they definitely should. This is just one part of what they do today. There are a lot of other things that they do, and uh, especially help app quality better. People, I, if you have never taken a look at mobile.dev, never heard of it, uh, go check it out at least. We'll put in a couple of links in the description as well. Vedant, did you have any other questions before we finish?
No, I think I'm done.
Cool. In that case, I think, yeah, this was fun having you here. Thank you so much for taking time and answering so many questions that we had. Can't wait to see and more progress. Definitely interested to see how that changes uh, the UI testing landscape for sure. Because I would I'm hoping that it makes our lives easy long term. That you can write UI tests and you don't shy away from them, like irrespective of your organization size or the state, right?
Correct, correct. Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely one of our missions at mobile.dev, that it should not slow you down like on the UI test. And yeah, just try the features that we have. Maestro will give you like immense powers, and submitting your tests and uploading all the flows in mobile.dev would definitely uh, not only help you in functional tests, but there are like non-functional analysis as well, which you can use and keep a check on it. Because it is basically making it easier for everyone, right? Like you don't need to like now wait for your developer resources to increase and then invest on
Correct.
Espresso and then invest on non-functional checks, and even have QA audience to increase the resources, and then do the Appium test or whatever you are right now doing. It's easier to just submit the workspace, prepare the flows, submit it in mobile.dev, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Makes life much easier for sure.
Definitely.
Cool.
I think,
Thank
yeah.
you so much.
Yeah. On that note, we can close the stream. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks, Amandeep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.